Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending our session today. So, we're still waiting on a few more people. I will just begin now. Thank you again for attending. This is our third module in our four-part series, Virtual Tutoring as a Solution. So, over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about different subcategories of virtual tutoring, such as an introduction to virtual tutoring, the Learning Center in 2D perspective of virtual tutoring. Today, we have a very exciting discussion brought to you by Dr. Matthew Durso on the learning deficit gaps and psychology of student motivation. So, super excited for that. We'll begin again in a couple of minutes, but feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you're new here. And my name is Ajay Tolia. I'm the program coordinator of this ECHO program. Just a disclaimer, this session will be recorded. And again, if you are new, please feel free to put your name, what organization you're affiliated with, and what you'd like to learn through this program in the chat. So, our case study today follows Craig, specifically Craig's academic turnaround. Craig is 10 years old. He's in fifth grade. He's being tutored in math and English, specifically by a college student, and he's being tutored around one time a week for about 45 minutes. So Craig was referred to virtual tutoring after receiving failing grades in math and English. Prior to the pandemic, Craig was a motivated student who received mainly A's and B's. His teacher claimed that he has been disengaged in class and lacks confidence. He has also become less connected with his teachers and friends. So I'd like you all to keep this case study in mind as we discuss this subcategory today. But to introduce Dr. Matthew Durso, our speaker today. So, Dr. Matthew Durso is a clinical psychologist, in practice in New York and New Jersey since 2010. He also serves as the Dean of Guidance at Delbarton since 2013 in New Jersey. Dr. Durso obtained his undergraduate degree from the University of Notre Dame, followed by a master's and PhD at Teachers College of Columbia University. So we're super excited to have you on, Dr. Durso. I will stop sharing now. Oh, I believe I already did. Perfect. But whenever you're ready, feel free to begin.
Okay. Ajay, thank you so much for this opportunity. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I am going to try and make this as interesting and engaging as possible. And I'd welcome questions along the way. If I go over something too fast, please feel free to kind of chime in on the Q&A function, and then we can go from there. I'll be drawing from some personal experience working with kids over the years, and then also from what I hear from our teachers who are kind of the boots on the ground when it comes to our students. And just for reference, the school where I work is grades 7 through 12, and we got about 650 so boys. So let me see if I can effectively share my screen, which will be a test of my technology skills. Okay. Ajay, that showing up? Can I get a thumbs up, thumbs down?
Yes,
Awesome.
that's perfect.
All right, let's begin. So a couple of the things that we are going to take a look at are just some very briefly the overview of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on learning, how to build connection to foster engagement, some myths versus facts around motivation, and then hopefully we can get to kind of some information around assessing attention and interest in online. So looking back, we were all affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in large and small ways. And since the WHO declared a global pandemic on March 11th, 2020, it led to widespread social isolation and a reliance on virtual communication. And it drastically altered how kids socialize and learn. And the impact on their education and learning has been substantial. It has made their learning screen dependent, or at least was for a period of time. And we noticed that it had affected kids cognitively, socially, as well as emotionally. And it affected different kids in different ways, both in terms of socioeconomic status, kids with disabilities, disproportionately affected. And it brought the mental health needs of students to the forefront. We noticed that there were multiple negative effects of the pandemic: disrupted sleep, poor attention, stress, depression, boredom, frustration. It ran the gamut. There were also academic and cognitive consequences. Remote learning has been linked to lower academic performance. We'll get into that in a little bit. And there were declines observed in multiple areas of achievement and lowering test scores year over year. As learning returns to in-person, the effects continue to persist. And we look to how remote tools may be able to help us and help our students develop with their skill development. But the long-term impact of the pandemic is still yet to be seen. So I highlight a couple of articles in this presentation. The first is a 2023 systematic review of a number of articles that were looking at globally the impact of COVID-19 lockdowns. Overall, the findings showed that there was a negative effect on the academic performance of kids. Students scored lower on standardized tests across multiple domains compared to prior years. And in the US, while there were some states where that effect was less observable, generally across the 50 states, those scores, their standardized test scores were lower in math, reading, and in math and reading. However, I think we can reflect and we can all identify ways in which, through what was kind of forced on us with the pandemic, there were some benefits of remote learning that came to the forefront. So after we returned to the classrooms post-pandemic, educators, families had an opportunity to see that it highlighted the importance of mental health. Schools tended to expand counseling services. They normalized emotional discussions. They integrated social emotional learning into the daily routines. The students, for some, benefited from the increased autonomy and flexibility that was necessary. They had opportunities for self-paced and interest-driven learning. And I think for a lot of people, myself included as a parent, we developed a deeper insight into our children's needs. The next couple slides, I'll talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic, and specifically how we're better connecting with students. And you can certainly consider your own experience, but I would say that through the pandemic, we learned to make classrooms sometimes more interactive. There was an increased use of visual tools for kind of live, engaging instruction. The proliferation of pre-recorded videos, embedded questions, polls, things of that nature really kind of brought the class to life. And there was real-time engagement with multiple students throughout classes. It kind of forced us to communicate clearly what the course structure was, what there were for students early on, so that we're reducing confusion, reducing anxiety. It forced us to maintain consistent routines for predictability for our kids. during a very unpredictable time. It helped encouraged us to adopt coping and self-care skills alongside of those academic skills, increase focus on student well-being. And it also kind of caused us to kind of create this library of resources, or at least our teachers did, where they had these interactive videos and online tests that they repurposed for classes over and over, reducing the burden on the teachers. Additionally, things that we learned was the importance of building community, engaging with students as individuals, building rapport beyond just the academic nature of the relationship. It got us to focus on things that matter, emphasizing the connection and the support between student and teacher. It certainly gave us an opportunity to learn hiccups with technology. And now that it's become kind of more routinely, not myself in this, but have gotten good at using technology. But when it's done well, polls, chats, real-time feedback. And then in some classrooms, it continues to be a hybrid format. And we learned how to make learning manageable. Meaning when we post videos, we know that we're not going to post videos more than 10 minutes so that we're kind of helping keep kids focus. We learned to kind of make those materials mobile accessible, and it also allowed us to kind of in asynchronously have these discussions with students about the material. So with all of these ways in which we connect to students better, I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about, well, how do we do that? And one of the ways that I talk about it here at Del Barton School is I always start with, when we're wanting to build connection, is to know the dog. And I know this sounds kind of strange, but that there is my dog, Baxter. He's 14 and a half. He's one of the highlights of my day, coming home to see him. And there he is sleeping in my son's chair. And I can tell you that if you want me to feel a personal connection with you, you ask me about my dog. And so I tell our faculty advisors, you want to get to know a student, know their dog, know their dog's name, know the dog's activities, ask about their dog and what their dog is up to, ask to see a picture of their dog. And obviously you could kind of expand this out in terms of building connection with kids, but the underlying premise here is to make something important for the kid important to you. I also like as we're kind of thinking about tutoring students, I would ask us to reflect on our own experience of those who have instructed us. And so I'll often talk to our teachers about, tell me about a teacher, a coach, a mentor, somebody that made a difference in your life. And what emotional words would you connect with that person? Right. And there are a couple of examples on the right-hand side there. And think about, how did you benefit from them being in your life? What would life have been like without them? Right. And then consider, how are you going to leave that same emotional impression on those students that you work with, those that you are tutoring, and having that kind of be the foundation for which you have these interactions with kids. So how do we start to leave that impression with the young men and young women that we work with? Well, I always say, and I always start with empathy. If I can find a way to empathize with the emotional experience of the kid I'm working with, right, then that is a great start. But it's problematic sometimes. It's difficult because we oftentimes with kids, we want to go to problem solving, right, where we are oriented around let's change the situation, especially when a kid is struggling, right? And who wouldn't want to help out a struggling kid, right? But I would argue that the first step is understanding, right? Being able to help a kid recognize that we're not focused on change just yet, but we're going to focus on the right here and right now. And while I understand in a tutoring session, you're probably interested in kind of getting to the material and getting through all the things that you really want to get to. But I would say that it has for that kid to trust you and to feel like you're invested in them, you probably should have a check-in and make sure that that there is some emotional connection and understanding between you. So, because oftentimes we go wrong in serious places, and I would say this is probably something that myself as a parent probably falls into, where we tell kids that there's no reason to feel that way, right? There's no reason to feel overwhelmed by this math problem, or we get philosophical about it, right? Things don't always turn out the way we want, right? Which, in a sense, dismisses the way a kid is feeling. As parents, or as older adults, we're oftentimes have a wealth of experience that we draw upon, and then we kind of engage in this problem solving dialogue, which the student may not need at that very moment, right? And then we kind of undermine their feelings with kind of questions about how they kind of arrived at the struggle. So, just a very couple of quick suggestions. And things that I use with students when I feel like the relationship needs to kind of be strengthened to help that student build up motivation to the thing that they want to do. And the first I would say is encouraging, right? And this is the verbal and nonverbal communication that we engage in that helps prompt others to kind of continue talking. And this is kind of where we get a sense of what their emotional experience is. And so we might take things that they say and we repeat those key words or we restate it. And it's done non-verbally too. Yeah, I get it. Head nods, things of that nature. Because we want kids to unpack that emotional piece that could be a hindrance for them learning down the road. So, for example, it's happening again. This never gets any better. Why do I put any effort in if I know it isn't going to work out? And I might ask the kid, again, isn't going to work out as an opportunity to get them to talk and maybe give me a little bit of a window into what's going on internally. So and in a kind of an expanded way, I might also suggest using paraphrasing, right? Where we're feeding back to that student the essence of what's been said. We're going to kind of summarize it, shorten it, but we want to make sure that we're communicating back to that student that we're really trying to connect with them and their experience and to get it from their perspective, not simply assume that it's coming, that we're going to see it from our perspective. So it might sound like, John, it sounds like, or Sam, I hear you saying, or it looks like the situation is, as a way of helping that kid kind of be to reinforce the idea that that student is kind of the primary in the room. So, in summary, this is a little bit about how I go about empathetic engagement with students that I work with. So, first, I try and identify how they're feeling in the given moment. I might actually ask them directly what they're experiencing, but I could also do it through observation and say, you look confused. I imagine this process feels overwhelming. I wonder what you're feeling, right? Give them an opportunity to help you identify the exact feeling that they're experiencing. And then I acknowledge it and validate it. What you're feeling is important. I'm listening as best I can. I can hear how frustrated you are. You're really struggling right now, right? To let them know what you're going through is legitimate. And then I might clarify along the way if I'm confused or I don't think I fully understand. What I'm hearing you tell me is blank. Do I have that right? What do you mean? Tell me more. Go on. I also want to take a moment to recognize that not all kids that we work with are the type of students that we tend to uh, go towards. There are lots of types of students for which tutors find or teachers find challenging. And I think it's okay to say that out loud. I think it's important. It's an important piece of reflection because some kids are just going to be a little bit more difficult, a little bit harder to engage. They're going to be the ones we tend to shy away from, right? And that should give us valuable information, letting us know where do we need to put our time and our effort. So as we're kind of building this connection and then we're looking forward to helping that student generate motivation, generate energy to engage in the lesson, to kind of work, I want to talk a little bit about goals. And I'm sure many of you have set goals before. This is kind of a quick overview of how I tend to do it with kids. And that first starts from let's separate what's process and what's product. What are process-oriented goals and what are product-oriented goals? Many of the students in our school are product-oriented. That outcome, A plus 100, that is the goal for them. And what I might argue to them, it's the process, it's the effort, if it's the journey of getting to be a more sophisticated learner that is most valuable. And so I define for them what is a process goal. And many of them kind of balk at this at first, but when I show them exactly how concrete it is and how specific and how it is tied to those larger outcome product oriented goals, they tend to come along. And I will often use the example, in basketball, if a player wishes to become a better jump shooter, she or he may have a process goal of taking 100 practice jump shots outside of practice every day. The result of the goal should be improving shooting percentage. And it probably will, although it's not necessarily a certain thing with the outcome. I'll have a 3-step process for engaging them in this conversation of goal setting. I'll ask them to consider what's been their recent academic performance, what's been the feedback from teachers around their classwork. I'll ask them to consider, as we're thinking about goals, what is their curricular context, right? Are we talking about setting a goal related to a particularly challenging class, a particularly easy class? We're going to want to know that so that we can temper expectations accordingly. I might then ask the student to identify an academic goal, get him to state maybe what specific grade goals they might have. And I allow them to have goals that may not necessarily be exactly what I imagine would be appropriate for them, but it's important to let them have some level of independence in this, some level of investment. But I will encourage them to set modest goals because with small victories, it's going to encourage future goal setting. And whatever their goal is, and this is, I think, the most important part, I'm going to ask them to list multiple strategies for achieving their goal. So I'll ask one question each tutoring session, right? Or I'll review my notes for 10 minutes out each day outside of the tutoring session. I want to elicit from him what he's going to do to achieve his outcome goals. And I want those examples to be specific. I want them to be measurable. I want them to be reasonable. I don't accept try harder, put in more time. For many of our students here, putting in more time is just not realistic. They won't be able to build more hours into their day. But these should be goals that are entirely within the student's control. I caution all of our teachers about this, and it's probably one of my favorite tweets. 4-year-old rubbing my arm lovingly. Thank you, Daddy. Me? Oh, you're welcome. But for what? 4-year-old for being my napkin. Runs off. I watch oftentimes as both our teachers and our parents, and maybe probably even myself sometimes, get caught up in doing too much for the student rather than putting the student in a position where they have to make a choice about what goals they have and what strategies they are going to use to get to those goals. We don't want to hamper them in any way or remove an opportunity for them to do for themselves. Oftentimes, if the kid you're tutoring is somewhat lost in the conversation, maybe that conversation isn't appropriate right then, but you might ask him to reflect on it and then come back and consider what goal or what strategies he or she is going to use. The real question is, who's doing the work in that conversation, right? Is it you? Is it the student? We really want to give them the opportunity to put in the effort to come up with something a goal that they are inspired by. So I love this example when it comes to goal setting. This is a picture of Kyle Dake. Kyle's collegiate career as a wrestler at Cornell underscores an important point about goal setting. Kyle, I heard this through an interview that he gave. He kept a written journal. And so when he entered Cornell as a freshman, twice a day, Dake wrote 2010 141-pound D1 NCAA national champion. And then he wrote that every day for the entirety of that freshman year. Then he achieved that goal. Then the next year, after moving up a weight class, he wrote his goal 4 times a day. 2011, I'm sorry, here we go. 2011, 149-pound D1 NCAA national championship. He wrote that 4 times a day. He moved up another weight class as a junior, and he wrote it 6 times a day. Then as a senior, he was writing it 8 times a day. And he would go on to become the first wrestler to have won an NCAA title in 4 different weight classes. When they asked him about this, his reply was, when they asked him why he was doing this journal, why he would write these things down, his reply was, so I would know what my day was about. And so whatever discussion you have with your student around academic goal setting, there should be some documentation of it and some encouragement from the teacher or tutor to write these things down so that there's a way to keep track of it. All right. What I'd like to move on is clearly motivation is an important part of learning. However, there are some misconceptions that I wanted to discuss. And the first is the myth that you're either motivated or you're not motivated, right? And the reality is this motivation is not a personality trait or a characteristic of any person. Everyone is motivated, but what they are motivated for differs from topic to topic and situation to situation. So saying that a person is in general is motivated or not is inaccurate. Motivation differs by subject, by topic. So for example, let's say you have a student, Jeremy, and Jeremy turns off during math time. He looks out the window, he rolls his eyes, he doodles on his paper. However, on the soccer field, Jeremy's focused, persistent, right? Has high standards for himself, and he loves the game. Obviously, his motivation varies from situation to situation. So for our tutors, we want to determine what the students are interested in and relate content that is of interest to them. All right. So in certain cases, you might suggest a book on sports figures to a student who is interested in sports. For topics that are not within a student's area of interest, and there are probably many, you could describe the usefulness of the materials, of the material for the things in which they're interested. So for example, if a child's not interested in history but loves dinosaurs, the child could be motivated by learning about how history can provide information about how dinosaurs came into being. Motivation is also affected by context um, and the motivating styles of others. So let me explain. Um, I think we have all had that experience of being in a class where the topic did not seem that interesting, but that topic was brought alive by a highly enthusiastic teacher. We've also experienced the converse. We think that a topic is going to be really interesting and we're motivated, and then we have an instructor that's less impressive. Right? So how we interact with others makes a huge difference in their motivation level. If we want our students to be motivated, it's important that we kind of create those environments in which the motivation flourishes. So how do we do that? Well, studies are going to show that people will be most motivated when they feel that they aren't being pushed or pressured, uh, they're competent to pursue the task, and that they're connected to those whom they're working with. So uh, we want to make sure that they don't feel pushed or pressured. So we want to offer choices in what or when or how they complete tasks. We want to help them create schedules, their own schedules, so that they can have some level of ownership. We want to encourage them to initiate, even if it doesn't fit the way that we planned it at first. And then we want to problem solve together when challenges arise rather than us problem solving for them. We want to help students feel competent. And so that to do that, we really need to be clear about expectations. We need to appropriately challenge them, not too easy, not too hard. And then we want to break tasks into smaller steps so that they're manageable, but then also achievable, thereby reinforcing the idea that the kid is competent. And we want to help students feel connected, right? And this goes back to understanding and empathy about how a student is feeling. Obviously, we want to create opportunities within the tutoring environment for fun, for positive interactions, and we want to make connection a routine, right? So that when we're connecting with the person that we're working with, that's just part of how our sessions go, rather than the initial session or rather than just a one-off. Another myth: rewards increase all kinds of motivations. But the reality is different kinds of motivation are effective based on the context of the situation. So rewards, things that, I guess in a regular classroom, we might consider stickers, snacks, things of that nature that we give, hoping to get these desired behaviors. But an effective method, especially for activities that are not internally interesting or intrinsically interesting, such as, say, making the bed or cleaning your room, or in a school context, doing keyboard exercises. We want to make sure those rewards can help in those instances. But for other kinds of activities, the rewards can actually be damaging to motivation in the long run. All right. And why? Well, rewards can increase motivation to obtain the reward, but they can actually undermine that intrinsic motivation that we talked about. So it's important to think about what kind of motivation is being encouraged. Are we getting kids to chase the reward, or are we helping them build a long-standing appreciation of the thing that they are doing or learning, or the skill that they are building? So what are those strategies for helping build that general motivation, right? So I would say building relationships with kids is paramount, right? We've already talked a little bit about building that connection. It's important to build rapport. Research shows that when we engage in activities with our kids and we convey that they find the activities important, the kids are more likely to find them important as well. We want to emphasize the usefulness of an activity or a topic. We convey to kids how the material is going to help them do something that they like. So, for example, how math can help a kid build a tree house, or how science can help kids make slime, right? That for a lot of kids, this is why labs in science are important. We also want to promote recognition of the personal relevance of the activity or topic. So when an academic content is relevant to the kid's everyday life, motivation for learning increases. So we just, for example, we can discuss the science of sports, such as speed and velocity for baseball, right? Or teaching reading or writing through lyrics of a kid's favorite song. Make it personally relevant. And then obviously we want to make activities fun and interesting. We want to get them engaged and excited. And the virtual realm or the online realm offers a lot of opportunities for that, such as through like online quizzes. All right. One more. Motivation is not enough, is enough for success. I think most people would agree that that probably isn't true. Skills and strategies beyond motivation are required to be successful. So what we know is that highly motivated students can struggle and struggle all the time for lots of different reasons. Even if they're highly motivated, they still need those skills and strategies to be successful. Motivation provides the direction for behavior and gets us to act in a certain way, but it's not the be all end all. So for example, if you have a student that is taking a geometry class and they have an upcoming exam the next week, they might be motivated to get that A, but the reality is does that student have enough self-control to forego hanging out with friends on the weekend instead of studying? The ability to self-control is going to play a large factor in terms of how she does on that exam. So we really need to teach those kids that prerequisite knowledge, those skills to complete tasks, in addition to motivating them. So that would include helping them with the goal setting, organizing their materials, teaching them about the value and the actual execution of asking for help. Okay. All praise increases motivation? Not necessarily. Cultivating a growth mindset can lead to increased motivation. I assume a lot of people have heard about growth versus fixed mindset. This comes out of the work of Carol Dweck, and has kind of spun off and become pretty influential in the educational sphere. So praising ability can actually lead to demotivating. Telling kids that they're smart, brilliant, or a natural when they perform well can lead to their thinking abilities becoming thinking that their abilities are fixed or unchangeable. And so, that idea that if a kid who has this fixed mindset that they are X amount of smart, they may avoid difficult or challenging tasks because they fear that such tasks are going to reveal that they're not sufficiently smart to overcome that task. So their logic would be, if I succeed because I'm smart, I must fail because I'm not. So what's the use of trying? So what do we know about fixed and growth mindsets? So students with growth mindsets have the tendency to view achievements in, say, athletics, arts, school subjects as an inherent part of the learning process that can be overcome with more effort, practice, and a toolbox of strategies. So kids with that growth mindset, they're going to see value in their effort. They're going to choose more challenging tasks over the easy ones. They're going to take advantage of opportunities to get help because they see others as being sources of assistance. They are going to persist longer when they are challenged. So when they face a difficult problem, they're going to stay with it longer if they have a growth mindset. And they're going to see those early challenges and the failures as opportunities for growth. Um, it's notable that students might hold a fixed mindset in one domain, but a growth mindset in a different domain. Um, and it's important here that we note that mindsets can change. We can foster in our kids, a sense of a growth mindset for those areas where they are fixed. Whoops. So a couple of encouragements here for cultivating that growth mindset. We want to praise effort, right? We really want to drive hard on, how hard a kid is working. Might say to them, I'm impressed with the time that you put in on this. I'm impressed with how much focus you've spent on that. We want to reassure them that the struggle is part of the growth. We want to compliment challenge. We acknowledge that everything carries a risk of failure, as all new things do. And we want to let kids know how much we admire the choice to take this on. We want to reinterpret failures. We want to let them know that this is an opportunity to try a new strategy, or it's an opportunity to get feedback so that we can eventually improve. We want to praise their resilience, like celebrate their tenacity, and take time to reflect with them on the importance of, working through that struggle. We want to associate effort with perseverance, and so we might actually connect them with how great performers work hard to get good. Where I think in popular media, people see individuals like LeBron James or Alex Morgan, the soccer player. They might assume that person is naturally talented and that's why they got to where they got. But in reality, right, they did not get there based on talent alone. And then, of course, we always want to encourage asking for help, seeing this as a strength, not as a weakness. I'm looking at the time here. I want to make sure we finish up. So when little effort is required for success, I might say, we can avoid the temptation to praise kids. It's okay to let them succeed on an easy task, because if we praise it, there's the possibility that kid might think that we weren't sure if they were going to be able to take on that easy task. And then when a kid succeeds at an easy task, instead of providing praise, we might ask them instead, did you enjoy the task? What they liked about it, how they could solve that task differently. Okay. I'm going to skip ahead here just in the interest of time. I understand that when we're working with kids online, it can be a little bit difficult to assess whether they are attentive, whether they're engaged. And so I offer just a couple of ways of organizing how we are assessing when in online learning student attention. So we can't rely always on the traditional visual cues that are there for teachers who are in the physical classroom. But in terms of behavioral engagement, this would include noting the visible participation of kids, such as their engagement using the chat function, asking or answering questions, helping a peer, although in a one-on-one tutoring session, that wouldn't be it. And then kind of spontaneously contributing to discussions. For cognitive engagement, we might assess student attention through the mental effort that they exert. When students tackle those challenging tasks, when they persist in on those that are difficult, and when they use strategies to learn effectively, that might signal a greater student attention. And lastly, their effective engagement. meaning the student emotions that come out as a part of the tutoring session. When they show interest, curiosity, enjoyment, those are all positive signs. Whereby boredom, stress, anxiety, frustration tend to indicate disengagement from the material. I'm going to So I want to end how I usually begin all of my sessions with kids. And this is an exercise that I love because it really promotes connection with kids. And I offer it here for your use when you're working with kids. And that is the rosebud thorn exercise, where I ask the kid, tell me the rose, the one thing that you love from the last week, or the one thing that went your way. Tell me the thorn. Tell me the one thing that upset you, the one thing that didn't go your way, and then tell me the bud, right? That rose that's not a rose just yet, but that's the thing that you were looking forward to that is going to make you happy. All right. And that's a great way to start up a session because it has such a personal nature to it. And most kids can think of something for each of those. And oftentimes I'll share my own rose, thorn, bud with them as well, so that we have this kind of dialogue from which we then launch into our session. Okay. Uh, Ajay, I think I'm going to finish there. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Durso. It was fantastic. I know. I personally learned a ton. I hope you all did as well. So we'll jump right into questions. First, let's start with Mr. Felly. He's actually based out of Malawi, Africa. Specifically the Dzaleka home-based care. He has a question for orphans or children without strong family support. What key habits or attitudes can help them succeed despite their difficult situations?
So I'm going to re-say it again just so I make sure I got it. What added? So say what attitudes can make
What
for
key habits or
success?
attitudes? Yes. Mhm.
So for the tutor or for the student, I would say for the tutor, right, being reliable, having an established routine, um, being consistent, right, provide that stability provides for some sense of calm for kids. Um, but for the student, I would say it's important to kind of know the student's personality, the things that they value, because I generally think all kids, right, are great kids, right, and but that greatness is revealed um, in sometimes very easy ways to see, and sometimes a little bit harder to see, right. And that goes back to kind of the different types of kids that we encounter as part of our tutoring, right. And so it's our job to kind of uncover what are the things that are wonderful about these kids. I often talk to parents, and one thing I'll say to them is, I generally believe parents love their children, right? Not every parent likes their kid all the time. And can you tell me, what do you like about your kid? Why would you want to hang out with your kid if it wasn't your kid, right? And as teachers or as tutors, I think it's important to kind of think about that way with our kids. What do I like about this kid so much, right? And then we reflect that back to them, because lots of kids don't come from circumstances where they have that positive messaging reinforced with them, right? And this might be that opportunity for that kid. This time with your students might be that opportunity for that kid to feel really good about himself. I hope that answered the question. Please let me know if not.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Felly, feel free to ask a follow-up in the chat if you have any follow-ups. To move on, we have a question by Cecilia. So she has a few students with ADHD that highly benefit from tutoring. Do you have any advice on how to keep them engaged during sessions?
Yeah, and so I'll not to be a broken record, but I would say that routine for those kids is definitely important so that they understand that there is a structure and that there is an overall goal for the sessions, right? Being very clear about that. I would also add that being flexible in those moments is necessary as well. And so, in terms of strategy wise, I think it's important to kind of test out um, which things are going to be most captivating for that type of student. So, is it something where it's a video? Um, how long a video can that student tolerate, right? What kind of precursors to that video do they need in order to engage, like pre uh, some kind of discussion questions announced ahead of time. I would think about allowing the student an opportunity to have some control over the session, right? And then dictate what order they go into things or what things they would like to learn about. Because they are not the traditional student, we need to find kind of a-traditional ways to kind of get them engaged. They will not sit there for the expected amount of time maintaining a sustained attention like some other kid might. And so we have to be careful about fatigue with them. And so there may be short breaks that end up giving them an opportunity to kind of step away from the material, kind of reset their mindset with a fun, engaging activity, and then kind of returning to the material again. Working with students with attention deficits can be challenging because it's exhausting, right? And I understand that for tutors, there's a feeling of I want to be productive. I want to show the student that they are getting better. I want to show to the parents that that these sessions are worth it. But we have to kind of make sure that we are putting that worry in check, and really kind of seeing what the day brings with that student. Some of those students, in terms of the attention problems, the timing of the session is going to be important, right? And not just because medications wear off for some kids who are on medications, but also because timing of the day, right? They may have gone through an entire day of school, are now exhausted, and now we're sitting on the screen here, right? And so maybe the later at night, right? Maybe harder, maybe earlier in the afternoon, maybe easier. It really does kind of take a little bit of thinking through and trying testing what works best. So both the presentation, the level of student involvement in determining what happens, and then the timing of the session.
Okay, we have another question by Dan. He has tutored students in the past who haven't seen an immediate benefit from being tutored, and after a few sessions, they seem to want to quit, and um, they might be not as engaged due to different things like feeling like they aren't able to potentially keep up with their work. Do you have any tips to persuade such students to stick with it?
Yeah, and so before I get there, I had another thought on the ADHD students. The other thing I might say is that to do kind of check-ins in terms of their attention level, asking them, how are we doing in terms of paying attention, right? Or asking them to repeat back something that you said, to kind of get them thinking in a metacognitive way about how they are doing at that skill of kind of honing their attention, kind of showing them, listen, I see you looking off over here. I wonder what you're thinking about, right? Oh, I was thinking about squirrels in the trees over there, right? And then kind of bringing them back. Um, to the question in terms of when students have sessions, and at some point they kind of peter out and students express a desire to kind of terminate the sessions. I might return back to what were those early goals, what portion of those goals were achieved, right? And then reinforcing what might be meaningful about that, right? So that over the course of the first couple of sessions, like hopefully there's been some kind of very kind of explicit goals that have been set, right, for what we are learning and why it's important. Is that important because mom and dad will be proud of me? Is that important because my teacher's going to say good things? Is it important because I walk into the classroom the next day and I feel like I can compete in the classroom? I feel confident next to the guy over here. Is it, I get a better grade on a test, right? Whatever that is. And so I might return to those goals and ask that student, well, you put in this time. How did we do? Right? And if not, right, ask them, well, what can we do differently? Right? If the first couple of sessions aren't sitting well, what do you think would be better? Right? I also like asking kids, tell me about a teacher that really worked for you. Like, what was it about them that made them special, that made it easy to learn, that really connected with you? Because that's usually where I'll start to think about, well, how am I presenting myself? Right? I mean, I've got my way, but I know that I can't just be me. I've got to think about what works best for this kid. And so I might draw upon what they tell me in terms of, oh, this other guy, he does this, this, and this, right? Okay, maybe we should try doing a little bit of that, right? And we make the adjustment on our end, right? And demonstrate some level of engagement in their success.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Durso. I think we will start to wrap up. So, thank you again for being on today and presenting. It was awesome. I know I learned a ton, and I hope you all did as well.
Ajay, I'm going to put my email in the chat here. If anybody would like to contact me, um, I would love. Just put my name in. I would love to connect with you. Feel free to reach out to me, and I really do appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with anybody in the educational sphere.
Okay, sounds great. And yeah, thank you again. This was amazing. I am also sending a form to the chat. If you have any feedback on this session, feel free to answer the forum and we can pivot and potentially change some aspects of the session for the 3rd, November 3rd, which will be our next session. So if any of you would like to join the next session, I would highly recommend it. Again, it's going to be run by Om Mangani, specifically on how to structure and optimize a virtual tutoring program. So again, a continuation of our program, Virtual Tutoring as a Solution. I highly recommend it. If you can, join. If you can't, I totally understand. Hopefully you learned something today. Besides that, thank you all for joining. Thank you again, Dr. Durso. This was fantastic.
Thanks, Ajay. Thanks everybody for coming.
Okay, I'm ending the session now. Bye, guys.